And ours is really cool because it's telling them we're a come-as-you-are steakhouse. We've got 3,000 LPs. You're going to get a chance to hear them and listen through. Chef-driven menu. So, they're getting told all these things in a brief, concise way. They're like, this is going to be awesome.
Welcome to The Profitable Table, fed by Woolco Foods, a podcast at the nexus of hospitality, business, culture, and the mind. Now here's your host, Woolco Foods CEO, Steven Toboroff.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Profitable Table, fed by Woolco Foods. I'm your host, Steven Toboroff, and today I have as my guest someone who has some of the most amazing decor and coolest concepts that I've seen in the restaurant business in my career. I saw a post on social media and had to reach out to him, and really delighted that he agreed to come in here and take the time to have a conversation with me. So my guest today is Kevin Flannery, who is the owner of Vinile Steakhouse and Vinile Chophouse. Kevin, thank you so much for coming in today and having a conversation.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you, Steve. It's awesome to be here.
So there's a lot of questions I have about your concept, your emergence into this industry. But before we jump into it, can you tell me a little bit just about yourself, how it is you came into the hospitality space and what led you to Vinile and Vinile?
Yeah. So I grew up in Akron, Ohio, around the age of 16, which I think at that time was the earliest legal working age, if you will. My father basically drove me around in his car for a few hours until I found a job, and restaurants seemed like low-hanging fruit. So Damon's Barbecue, Fair Lawn, Akron, Ohio was my first gig, a dishwasher there. I actually didn't like the restaurant industry when I first got into it. I had the pruny hands and piling dishes, and it was tough work. But I kept at it, and I kept working in that industry until I got into fine dining. And that was in Columbus, Ohio, around 2001. I started with Morton Steakhouse there in Columbus, Ohio. And for me, that was very eye-opening. I was a blue-collar kid, family of 6. We had never gone out to a nice dinner in our whole life, to a fancy restaurant. And here I am putting on a tuxedo and working, alongside these very esteemed and accomplished servers and bartenders and managers. And I fell in love and got enamored with it then. And that was all part of my journey, because not only did I now like the restaurant industry and see its potential and its, romantic ability, but I furthermore saw a need, which kind of leads us to why Vinile Steakhouse exists, where, when I was doing all these odd jobs before restaurants, cutting grass and framing houses, whatever kind of odd labor jobs, we always listened to rock and roll, and we listened to great music. Even when I was in the dish tank, I had a little speaker playing, Zeppelin, Stones, whatever. And here I am now listening to Three Coins and a Fountain and bored out of my mind. But I loved everything else, the prime steak, the dimly lit settings, the great wine list. So right then and there, 20 years ago, I said, I got a vision here with Vinile. So we're going to combine great music and everything you love about steakhouses.
That's really cool. And I love the fact that it started 20 years ago, that you had that vision. And I also remember, as I was researching the podcast, that one of the dishes on your menu, a sushi dish, was something you had tried in Beverly Hills, I believe, 12 years ago.
Yeah.
So I love the fact that you sort of have these memories and these decisions that are embedded in your mind, and then they come to fruition. With respect to Vinile Steakhouse, you really did bring this creative vision into life, because as I was saying at the introduction, the decor is so cool from what I've seen.
Yeah.
When it comes to the music, Kevin, and your utilization of it in Vinile Steakhouse, in addition to the decor, what type of thought do you put into what music you play during dinner service? Because I remember I worked as a host in a number of restaurants, and I once selected some music, and the manager got really ticked off because he felt... So what is that thought process like as you utilize this vast library for your restaurant?
Yeah, it's important. And first of all, with the decor, thank you for complimenting it. I call it bohemian fine dining. I really think it's cool how I always joke, it feels like you're in like Stevie Nicks' apartment or something, And what it does is it allows the space to be quintessentially New York without bothering anybody. The pressed tin ceiling has some spots falling off and the cracks in the walls and, some holes in the wood on the floor. And it's all great because it's all part of our identity that we're not trying to be stuffy and we're not trying to make this place too rounded and polished. Music is essential to our brand and not in sort of a corporate way, in a way that we need to be who we envisioned to be, 20 years ago, which was a rock and roll centric steakhouse. So there's been 1,000,001 conversations about what is playing, what will be played. For the first 3 months of the restaurant, I did the set list every night. So around opening time, around 3, I'd have a coffee or whatever and go through my collection and I would pick it out and kind of thumb through and grab about, 50, 60 LPs and say, this is what we're playing at any random order. Eventually, at some point, the guests, of course, naturally wanted to get involved. And so they would ask, what do you have? What can we see? And our first music list was actually really cool. I kind of miss it. It's not practical anymore, but it was a wine list that we printed all the LPs and we made the year of the album's release like the year of the bottle of wine. But it became very difficult to keep up with as we acquired more and things. So we eventually went the route of Discogs. I'm sure you're familiar with Discogs, but Discogs is an app that allows you to put it all in digitally. And now we have it on iPads. People can look through. So now it's an amalgamation of the guest picking and then us keeping our center lane. So I always tell my staff, listen, if we get a little out there, and we're playing, a pop record and maybe a jazz record, and now we're back to another pop record. So now they know, get some CCR on, get some Stones on, get some James Brown on, bring us back to being Vinyl Steakhouse. So that's how we look at it. We got a lot of stuff, and not all of it, I guess, would be the quintessential Vinyl Steakhouse playlist. But if we get lost, we bring it right back every time.
Something that's really interesting to me as I'm listening to you, and it raises another question, is on the one hand, you have a very steeped and impressive background in the restaurant industry, working for large corporations, large, well-known hospitality brands. On the other hand, you've had the courage and vision, really, to make these incredibly creative and authentic decisions. Authenticity, I'm hearing a lot of. My question is, do you find that having had that, for lack of a better phrase, formalist background has helped give you the courage and the foundation to make these creative decisions? In other words, has that formalist background served as a helpful catalyst that's enabled you to go well beyond it and branch off?
I think so. I think it gives you confidence. For me and my story, there came a point where, and I think other people have had this moment where you kind of look around and you say, what's next? And why am I not doing this for myself? And that's not a knock on any of my employers. In fact, my last job, which was with Cameron Mitchell Restaurant Group, which owns Ocean Prime, was probably the best job of my life. And it was really complicated to leave because it was questionable if I was better off with an employer than myself, and that's not, I don't think a lot of people have that predicament. Yeah, I think that gives you all the base work to say, I've been here, I've done it, I know what's around most corners waiting for me. You just look back on a common sense approach. I've done this role, GMing or essentially running restaurants, 6 different places, 6 different times over 20 years. And guess what? I've never failed. I've always increased sales. I've always increased regulars. I've always improved the culture of the restaurant. So why would that not happen when I do my own? You know what I mean? So I think it's important, but you really do have to be ready. The workload has been, as you would imagine, it's nonstop. There's never nobody's there to cover you. You have to do it all. So that's the part where you don't know what lies ahead, but that's where the courage comes in.
From my vantage point, what I've seen a lot of times in my career, and I think will probably relate to this after I say it, is owning a restaurant is such a romantic dream that so many people have. And yet a lot of times, due to their lack of understanding of the business aspect of it, that dream can become a really bad nightmare. And what's so cool about your concept and others that I've seen that are successful is when you have operators that know the business inside and out, and they're handling that, they can be so much more comfortable and, I don't know if the word is aggressive, but they can just really make those artistic decisions because they know that the formalistic business side of it's covered. Whereas a lot of times people who don't have that experience and they just want to go all artistic, that can really damage your business because without the understanding of how to run a business, how to manage staff, how to maximize regulars, as you say, all of the other choices won't come to fruition.
Yeah, for sure. And I've kind of had the tale of two stories. Because, you mentioned in the opening, we also have Vinile Chophouse, which is our second concept nearby. And we started that in February, and this has been a very tumultuous year. I'm sure you guys at Woolco have felt some of that too. And so with vinyl, we just hit a home run. I had dreamed the place up for 20 years. I knew the answer to every question you could ask me before you even asked it. I had thought through every detail, and it's just such a great place and a great vibe from food to checks every box. And Vinile is very similar, a great restaurant. I mean, it's absolutely delicious. The service is fantastic. It's a great location on 17th Street. Vibe's great. But it didn't have quite the same, home run right at opening, and it didn't, I guess, check all the boxes as much as Vinyl did when opening. But now all my experience just came flashing back to me, as I got into that challenge of actually having to dig and find and fight and create and change things, in real time for the solvency of a business. And it's all been exactly why, investors believe in you and why you do it, because we've got it now. Menus better than ever, places pop in, it's wonderful. And here we go again,
No, I love that. And I can totally relate from my own business that no matter how long you're in it or how well things are going, there's always those moments in time where you have to take a step back and re-engage with your business and problem solve and deal with things with a fresh eye. And I think that's where having that impressive background helps. Something else I really admire about your concept, I haven't had the pleasure of eating there yet, although we were discussing before we recorded.
We'll get you there
God willing, I want to come with my kids are big steak guys.
That'll be great.
Is from reading about this and researching it, every aspect of the dining experience, you can tell you've paid massive attention to, from the ambiance to the cocktails to the menu, which we haven't gotten into. For those listeners that are desirous of getting into the hospitality space or just getting into it, how would you suggest they think about the restaurant business in terms of either prioritizing things or making sure that everything is functioning? Because I know from my experience that service and how people feel when they interact with the staff is a huge part of it. But ambiance and comfort level, how do you sort of organize this internally, even from the beginning, or even maintaining this incredible vibe where you're making sure that all four of these pieces, five of them, however many we want to break it down to, are at the highest level?
Yeah, I think, that is something that you can strategize on, but also you have to ride that as a guest almost and kind of feel that. And so we've made some adaptations to that over the years. It starts with a very well thought out business plan. And for example, I'll tell you the uniforms of the staff, I think is very interesting for Vinyl Steakhouse. Like, it's not at all what people are used to as a steakhouse. The females have an attire that is it's very edgy, I guess I would say. And what's great about that is I think it sets the tone right away. Like, I'm not along for my usual ride at a steakhouse here. And then we do an opening spiel, which was something that I had seen over the years at Morton's and at Ocean Prime and some of the places I worked, where you're teeing up what's about to happen. You're kind of like setting the tone, wetting the palate for the guests. And ours is really cool because it's telling them we're a come-as-you-are steakhouse. We've got 3,000 LPs. You're going to get a chance to hear them and listen through. Chef-driven menu. So, they're getting told all these things in a brief, concise way they're like, this is going to be awesome. We're going to have a different kind of menu than we're used to. We're going to have a different kind of service, a different kind of listening experience. And then it's just executing on that, that promise that you just made to them about what's about to go down. And so that's kind of our philosophy on it and our take. The food has been well crafted. I'm sure we'll get into that a bit more. I think you have to make the dishes unique, but not too unique. Same with the cocktails. And so we keep this like kind of different center lane than other people, where we're not driving on the same road as the popular steakhouses that everybody's been going to for 50, 60 years, but we're not far off either. You know what I mean?
Totally. And I love that strategic decision because on the one hand, you're right. When I used to think of steakhouses, and I've been to Morton's, I've been to other ones, it's those sort of big banquettes and the music that's very subdued and the staff in tuxedos. So what I think is really cool about it, and would love, and I have a question on this, is on the one hand, it's a very accessible concept for people that are not traditional steakhouse people, but may want the chef's menu, may like steak, but they don't want that vibe of having that formal cocktail, or that formal tuxedo rather. At the same time, it lends itself to being a great choice for people who love steakhouses and want a unique steakhouse experience. Mm-hmm. And so my question to you, Kevin, because it just came to me as I'm listening to you, is where do you think you're having the bigger impact, if you could quantify it, with consumers coming in saying to you, you know what, I've never been a steakhouse person and this has changed the game for me and I love this? Or people coming in saying, look, I love steakhouses. Everywhere I go, I'm a steakhouse person. And I had to come here because of your new concept. What type of feedback do you get from both of those types of consumers?
Yeah, that's an awesome question that I don't know if I've ever been asked. And I don't want to sound like I'm trying to ride the line here, but it really is almost like 50-50. And it's a blessing for us because we're getting it from all sides. Not just even that. I mean, even just demographically, we get young people who are getting into music again and vinyls. We get middle-aged folks where I, dare say my age, I guess, where we're just tired of what our parents or grandparents ever showed us. And then you get older folks who grew up with vinyl records and they can't get enough of it either. And then everything in between, like to kind of, I guess, more towards your original question, you get the Midtown Manhattan crowd that is just tired of the tuxedo lad, boring state, and they're coming down to us and they're loving it. And then you'll get a group of people coming in exactly what it was all meant to be, where they're in, these really cool, sweaters, custom made hoodies and awesome jeans and just the trendiest, awesome people that are coming in, and they've never felt comfortable in a steakhouse. And they love that they finally can enjoy what a steakhouse is all about. For their whole life, you walk in and they've just been treated a certain way or looked at for attire and such. And here we are, and they love it. So we're super excited, and it's bringing groups together in an old school way that New York always was kind of meant to be and do. And I love that about the restaurant, that it's just, you look around the dining room, it's just this great mix of, all walks of life enjoying a steakhouse again.
I love that too, because when I go out either with my wife or with my kids, my oldest son is 20, my middle son is 18, my daughter, and these kids want to dress the way they want to dress, but it really is hip and cool. And I'm not big into dressing up either. But what I also love about this, and then I have a question, is that the concept and everything came from this magnificent place of authenticity and creativity, yet at the same time, it's a brilliant strategic move for the reasons we just discussed. It's funny how that works out, because not only are you opening up a concept to people that were never steakhouse people, but you also have a concept that's perfectly tailored for people that love steakhouses. Yeah. It's just funny. It's one of the great things.
It's a little dumb luck, and it could have backfired too. And we were worried about that when we opened. We were scared. We thought, man, we might never see a businessman or woman from Midtown ever in this steakhouse because it's too edgy. You're playing, we got the 9-minute version of Moby Dick playing by who's going to come do this and conduct business? But it worked, and so a little bit of dumb luck, and we didn't strategize. And by doing so, we strategized.
But it's interesting because so many people, I'm thinking of previous guests I've had, one for Super Burrito and others, where those businesses that really lean into a creative and authentic decision is often the best business decision. And I guess that's one of the things that makes the hospitality business so cool. I do want to shift gears and get into the cuisine a little bit and start contextualizing it like this. Actually, all three of my kids love steak. So whenever we go out, one steakhouse that we go to, I live in New Jersey, is River Palm Steakhouse in Edgewater. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but I used to go to a bunch of places. So they love steak. My wife and I are not really big steak eaters, but we love going. My wife loves salmon. My question, Kevin, is as you prepare a menu, how do you balance it between making sure you've got the, staples and the cuisine you need for the steakhouse, but at the same time having a varied enough menu? Does the non-steak options really play a big part in your thinking and menu design? Would love to hear more about that.
Sure. Steak was always what we focused on first and foremost. We wanted to be an iconic steakhouse. We want to be around for a long time. We've always wanted to go, as a little guy, go toe-to-toe with the big dogs out there and really be mentioned. When people mention the greatest steakhouses in New York City, we want our name to come up. And I know that takes time and resiliency and great product. So steak was always the first emphasis and what centers around a steak. But I guess our approach was to try to be uniquely different within the context of steakhouse normalcy. So for us, it wasn't cream spinach, it's cream spinach carbonara. And it's not mac and cheese, it's a truffle mac and cheese, which I know has now been done, of course. But, we don't have green beans, we have Parmesan crisp green beans. So we always wanted to take some chef technique and some fresh and vibrant kind of interesting approaches that would be safe enough, but still get adventurous. So in terms of the non-steak options, we kind of approach that more as being a neighborhood steakhouse. Clearly, we've become a destination steakhouse for New Yorkers and world travelers. We have guests from Germany, Australia, Belgium, South America, music bonds. So we're finding people from all over the world coming into our restaurant every night. But between that and, like you said, not everybody wants steak, but it starts to become, from my perspective, a form of hospitality. Your menu says a lot about how you welcome people without saying anything spoken. So for us, we want to have multiple seafood options, and we have a burger, and we have a chicken parmesan, actually, which is really good and kind of a sleeper success story there. And I'll speak a little bit about this one dish that really says it all, which is a vegan filet. And we have that on our menu. We're one of the few steakhouses, I believe, in America to carry a vegan steak. We've actually had one of the head people of PETA come and dine and promote us over it. We've had hundreds of vegans come. Vegans, it's a new era. They want to hang out in cool places like this too and listen to music. So for us, we're saying you're not welcome here if we don't have that item. So we try to have something for everybody, gluten-free, vegan, whatever options we can do to just make sure everybody's got an opportunity to eat there.
I love that. And that makes all the sense in the world, because the conceptual design of it is going to attract people from all types of preferences with cuisine, even though it's a steakhouse and a phenomenal one. So having that optionality, it really does come down to hospitality, like you're saying. Another aspect of your business that I can see you pay an immense amount of attention to as I was researching it, and this fascinates me as well, is the sommelier, the wine selection. Now that, of course, has been a staple for a lot of restaurants, fine dining, for a long time. But I also think it's something that a lot of places don't put enough thought into, and I think you have. How do you utilize in one place you have 5 sommeliers and another 3. How do you internally, or strategically perhaps I should say, utilize the sommelier to really maximize the dining experience in conjunction with everything else at Vinile and Vinile?
Yeah, it's a big part of our identity. So my wife and I are both sommeliers. I'm a certified sommelier, which means I've passed 2 of the 4 levels of the court master sommelier. So it's always been a big part of my identity. My family, always text me, when they're at a wine shop, what should I get? Christmas dinner, friends and so on and so forth have always relied on me. And when we started the restaurant, as being in our, a part of who I am, we wanted to kind of similar with the food menu we just talked about. Create something a little different, but still keep it center lane enough that we're not confusing people here. So we decided to focus on France, Italy, and the Americas, and that's our main focus at Vinile Steakhouse. So we have those 3 regions predominantly. Obviously at Vinile, it's an Italian, mostly Italian-inspired chop house, so we have a little more Italian there. And what happened was we got everybody all jazzed up about wine, and we're talking about it and teaching it and coaching it while we were opening. And everybody caught the bug and wanted to know more. So it started with one employee asking, hey, I'd love to be a som someday. And we said, well, Sophia and I went home and said, what the heck? Let's pay for him to be a som. It can only help us, right? So we paid for this person to be a som. And then the next person came around, and the next person. And so I believe we are up to 9 in-house sommeliers of a company with only about 60 employees. So nearly 10% there is, I guess over 10% is now becoming sommeliers. I'm not sure. I think 3 of them are still in the courses, but it's great for us because they share their knowledge with the tables, and we don't really expect much out of them. It's not like we put them on the floor and in a suit, and we're not pushy about the wine sales. We don't go up and say, I'm the som and what can I do for you? It's an ask thing. We tell guests they're here. They're in the restaurant floating around. If you want them, just say the word. And we like that approach. And that's what we do. And then we come over to the table and share our knowledge.
That's fascinating. It leads me to another area of the business that I wanted to explore, which is staff and the role of the staff, because you have a very creative, unique concept. And as I'm listening to you, clearly the fact that your staff is asking to learn more and get engaged and that you're supporting it is one of the key things in nurturing a phenomenal staff. So my question is, or one of my questions is, with this concept, which is really unique, creative, but you're executing on a high level in an established category, how do you approach the discretion that you give staff in terms of interacting and on all of that? Because a lot of times you're in a restaurant, and particularly in higher end ones, you can see that there's a real sort of clear blueprint when you're interacting. But oftentimes when you get that, I'm going to use this word again, authentic experience with the staff, it makes one of the most memorable parts of it. How do you navigate that aspect of your business with your staff and instill that type of creativity?
I think that's the big one. That's the differentiator that is really set us apart, and something that I do think not a lot of restaurants always get right, because it's a little scary to give your staff a lot of authority and autonomy sometimes. But done properly and whatnot, it's so powerful. So our staff, we use a term where we say, think like an owner. So we want our staff to literally think like an owner. You want to give a round of drinks to this table because you've gotten to know them and they're awesome and they are clearly going to come back, do it, and obviously we'll work together on that. Problem resolution, if something didn't go right, take care of something for them and make that decision. So we fully support our staff on those decisions. And because of that, they make absolute raving fans of all of these guests. And I've always said jokingly, the whole vision was to create a bunch of mini me's, because in the first couple months of the restaurant, it was me running around and shaking everybody's hand and meeting everybody. But of course, as 2 restaurants, 2 kids, life, I can't be there all the time every night. So I need everybody to sort of act and treat guests in the way I would. And so they've learned that. And it's kind of like a what would Kevin do moment. And they know Kevin would treat them to dessert tonight because they were very generous and they spent a lot of money and we want to see them again. So we're going to take care of dessert. So we have high comps. We're a generous group in that sense, but we also understand the value of creating long-lasting relationships with our guests.
That leads me to my next question. But before I do, I first of all, I really respect that you've successfully done that, because I think it's so important. And it's one of the main things that I try to instill here at Wilco. The one message I get, I think I've succeeded in doing this. I keep it to one message, which is do whatever is best for the customer in the moment. I don't care who you are, whether it's customer service, a truck driver, a sales rep, an accounts people, we'll worry about it later. Because I know that if I can get that one message through, everything else can be dealt with. But when you have people in your organization that are creating a negative experience, the amount of work to undo that is difficult.
And there's not time for it either, right? Because like if a table is having a bad experience and they have to go find somebody and discuss it all through and get approval, and that's where people miss. It's like, if they know my marching order here is to make everybody very happy and take care of our guests and our customers, then they're going to know what to do innately right then and there. It served us well. We wouldn't have it any other way. And it's more rewarding, right? If you're going to work for a company, a restaurant, or here at Woolco, wherever you're working, if you know you get to call some shots and you get to make some, I remember one time, Sophia and I read a review the next day, and the review said, blah, blah, blah. And then our waitress came over and we all took a round of shots together. And now normally in my corporate world, the waitress would have gotten fired. I would have been in the hot seat. The whole, 8 emails would have been going on about what happened last night at the restaurant. We kind of looked at it and said, I don't hate this. You know what? It shows that this person has autonomy in this restaurant and gets to act like an owner and think like an owner. Obviously got to make sure things are within reason and everybody's behaving and being smart. But we didn't hate it because of what it embodied in the sense of being overly hospitable to their guests and being fun, which is all part of Vinile Steakhouse.
Now, when I hear that, I hear high-level execution. That may be the highest level of execution on so many levels because, one, you're creating that memorable experience with the guest. 2, your staff is comfortable enough to make these decisions. And 3, you, as the owner, are supporting it because it's reinforcing your true mission. So I love that. And I remember watching an interview with the filmmaker John Cassavetes once as a director, and he was saying that what he aspires to as a director is for everyone on the film, whether it's the cinematographer, lighting designer, actors, to be as creative as possible in their own eyes, not trying to just give him what they think he wants. And you're 100% right. When you have talented people, like thank God we're blessed to have a lot of talented people here, the more autonomy, the more ownership of their job they can take, the better they do. But it's not an easy thing to create that culture, but when you do it, it really is vital. So as I'm listening to you, there was another question that came in my mind as we were listening to this, and that is, I noticed on the Vinile website, you have beautiful website, beautiful social media, one of the things that you were bringing people's attention to was the sound system at Vinile, which I really love because I can't recall anyone ever doing that. And yet for people who love music or that are real audiophiles, that's going to be an immediate hook.
Yeah.
What made you, I guess a 2-part question, what made you select that speaker system? And 2, have you found that feedback where real audiophiles come up and say, listen, I saw that you've got this 6 sound system. I had to come in and try it.
Yeah. That's a great question. Thanks for bringing that up. We did want to do that there. It's a differentiator because, the concepts are similar. We have prime steak at both, fresh seafood, chef-driven recipes at both. And that was the point. I mean, Vinile was super busy and we knew we needed another restaurant nearby for a lot of private events and overflow. So we were so close on so many things. We wanted to say, what can be different about Vinile? And certainly one thing was the sound and maybe a bit of what we play too. So we play what we call their more iconic voices. And when you're hearing those iconic voices, whether it be, Aretha Franklin, Al Green, Frank Sinatra, Johnny Cash, you want to hear that voice and you want to be in the room with that singer. And that's what that system does. That system made by K Array, which is what you saw on the website. It's Italian made, 100% made in Italy, Florence. Absolutely state-of-the-art equipment. I had my eyes on them for some time. We explored the idea of doing it at Vinile Steakhouse, but at the time we just couldn't handle it budgetarily. We were a startup. My wife and I had thrown in our life savings, got an SBA loan. There wasn't room for a very expensive audio system. We did okay. We ended up getting a great system, but it wasn't this level. So this one, I'd love for you to come out and check it out. It's really cool. We do get people that come for that reason, for sure. Not as many as you think. I mean, at the end of the day, I think the restaurant guest and customer is still looking for great food, great vibe and wonderful service more than they are a listening experience overall. But we do get it from time to time. And I think it's more about people appreciating it once it's been received and leaving and recognizing, wow, that sounded great.
Yeah, I'm going to have to check it out because I love music. So I think I'm going to come in with my kids and check that one out first because I love music. I've always loved music. I'm old enough where I remember, as we were discussing before we recorded, getting my albums in vinyl, and I wish I still kept them. One of the subjects you mentioned earlier, you've alluded to it since then, and I think it's so important, is the notion of regulars. I've done a number of podcasts with restaurant owners and industry experts. From a business standpoint, all of the various things that you really want to make sure that you're maximizing as a restaurant. And regulars is one of them. And I think having regulars with a steakhouse is on the one hand understandable, on the other hand challenging. But I would love to get some of your thoughts about how you what steps you take, what activities or disciplines you implement that really try to facilitate the notion of captivating and capturing regulars. I know you'd mentioned it at Morton's. It was a metric they looked at. Mm-hmm. Would love to have you speak a little more on that subject.
Yeah, I think it's huge. And I think Morton's at one point in time used to boast about a statistic that 50% of their business came from like 5% of their clientele. That's how big regulars were to them and at the steakhouse world in large. I mean, if you look at the prices at steakhouses, we're buying this beef and these fine wines, and it's not something, universally everybody can afford. So you are really trying to develop regulars of people that have this ability to enjoy what you're offering. First of all, I love regulars because for me, it's more than just a business transaction thing. It's a friend. It's a person that's helping to feed my family and put a roof over my head, as an owner. It was different when I wasn't the owner. They were, regulars, and it was still value driven, but a little different. For me now, it's so personal for me now. I could almost dare say some of them, I love them for what they do, but you just got to be there for them. And even when I was just a GM, I was, and that extension of your personal phone number, trying to be there. It's tough too. There's a lot of Mondays and Sundays when I'm off and, I'm heading into the restaurant because there's a regular there. And, I want to try to say hello and shake their hand and thank them for that. But definitely knowing their personal interest and what they're into. And, we have some regulars where they like a certain spirit. We'll make sure we have it there. I have a regular that I know his wife's gluten-free. We always make sure we get gluten-free breadcrumbs if we know he's coming to make a dish. So those moments are important too, because they know they're in good hands and they know they can trust you and that you're going to take care of them and their loved ones. But I think the most important thing is that it's not transactional. It's an earnest relationship that exists in the walls of that restaurant. And it's something special. In that sense, great memories are made, and we've had a lot of laughs and good times, and it's pretty cool.
That is cool, and I think the approach to it makes all the sense in the world when people feel as if it's their second home or they feel comfortable. Now, another sort of the flip side to this question is obviously New York City is a destination where people visit from all over the world, whether they're tourists or business. And what I've been seeing, and I discussed this in a podcast episode several months ago, is even tourists, when they come to New York, are looking for something that is really authentic in New York. Thanks to social media, thanks to really the communication that exists, it's no longer the case where you can just bank on being in Times Square or having that name. What type of outreach or communication, if any, because I would imagine that there would be people, like you just said, from around the world, they're coming to New York for their first or second time, or they're business visitors, and they want to give their clients an amazing experience. What steps would you recommend people take to try to capture attention in that segment of the market? Because as I said, it used to be that there were tourist places, there were regular spots, and very little overlap. And that's not the case anymore. In fact, if anything, the tourists want to find out where the regulars are going so they get that real experience. So are there any active steps that you take or would recommend for people to do to try to capture that?
I mean, I think recommend-wise, you got to go where the tourists have to go, right, which is hotels. So, we have a fantastic outreach with the hotels. We go to the hotels. We bring, a little goodie bag, if you will, maybe some treats, a little, some business cards. But more importantly, we do invite hotel concierges and GMs and such to come and dine in the restaurant and actually experience it, because then they can tell their guests about it. Because we're on social media and we have different forms that we do of, I guess, advertising and so on. So probably like most restaurants and businesses, but unless I'm the only one, it's almost impossible to know where the ROI is on all that stuff, right? So it's word of mouth. It's get out to make sure the right people in the right places know about you. When I was running in the Midwest, we used to always make sure, valet guys at hotels knew when people were arriving and tell them, and you can get as creative with that as you want. But at the end of the day, it all means nothing unless you are operating wonderfully well, right? So that's my biggest advertisement pitch, is make sure you are focusing on your customer satisfaction and your reviews and your ratings. We have been a perennial 4.8 on Google. I think right now we're on a dip at 4.7, but we'll be back up soon. Both restaurants are 4.8 on Google, and Vinile is always, in the top 1 to 3 on Yelp. And that's so important, because that's what people are really going to look at this day and age, in my opinion. And they are going to read the reviews and they'll see that that's where locals are going too. Because when you read the reviews, like you've mentioned, the authenticity of the restaurant comes through.
Now, as I was researching our interview, you had mentioned in another interview that you had done a concept called New York Grit. And you'd also talked about the desire potentially to have this concept in other markets outside of New York. So my question is, because I think it would be phenomenal, I'm thinking Nashville, I'm thinking of all these great music cities. So my question is, when you think about Vinile Steakhouse, because the decor and Vinile, the decor is beautiful, the concept is unique, all that. Do you view it as a concept where you would be bringing into these other music-loving cities the vinyl music, so to speak, more than the New York steakhouse type thing? How do you balance those two parts of your concept?
Yeah. That's a cool question. Thank you for asking. I think what I have envisioned with it is that we would bring some of New York, and I would like to do that if I could, maybe by way more so of some of the menu bravado, and maybe keep getting some of those steaks that we have on our menu at the steakhouse here in New York. But I think I always liked restaurants that embodied the character of the cities that they were in more than I do trying to carry some New York circus thing on the road, where it's like, hey, the New Yorkers have rolled into Nashville or into Austin or Los Angeles. So, I think New York will always be our flagship and our home base that we are proud of. But I would like to, first of all, yes, grow this concept. I think other cities in America would love this concept, and I can't wait to get there and do more of these. I think it's going to be an absolute home run in other cities. But I would like to, absorb that city's, kind of culture and design, if you will, and embrace that and bring our New York in smaller doses.
I lived in Chicago for 5 years, and I think I can just see this concept being so perfect, because Chicago is a huge steakhouse town and it's a huge music town. And
I'd love to do Chicago for sure.
I have a lot of fond memories about Chicago because I went to college there and stayed there free after graduation. But I like what you're saying, because there are a number of restaurateurs that have been able to really successfully deploy concepts across America. But I also further agree with you when you say that you want the concept to be tethered to where it's located as opposed to bringing something on the road. And I think I can even see the neighborhoods in Chicago. We'll talk about this,
And the music has to adapt. So why wouldn't kind of everything, because we're not going to go into Chicago and not have a little more blues in our collection, of
100%.
course. You know, we're not going to go to Nashville and not play some country. I think the center lane will always stay rock and roll, 1960s, 70s rock and roll, no matter where we go. But if we're going to adapt to the communities we're in musically, then why wouldn't we in other ways, you know?
And that's another beautiful component of the vinyl concept, because it enables you in a completely organic and natural way to tailor the restaurant to the community. Because as you say, Chicago blues, Nashville country, and we could go across America. So it's really cool where the music is reflecting.
Yeah.
I mean, this has really been fascinating for me, Kevin, and I could talk to you all day, but I want to sort of conclude by asking a question, because we have a lot of listeners that are aspiring entrepreneurs, a lot of them in the hospitality space, a lot of them in other businesses. And you've made it sound so natural and easy, but you and I both know how challenging the hospitality business is. And you've brought to life an extraordinarily creative vision that's been just really beautifully curated and executed. So my question would be is, if you were to be speaking to an up-and-coming, whether entrepreneur, somebody who wants to get into the hospitality space, what would you say would be the main concept or two that they should focus on at the beginning of their journey so that they lay a great foundation that enables them to grow from there and have an amazing career or an amazing business career?
I think there's two sides to that, a technical one and then maybe more of a spiritual one, if you will. And the technical one is get your concept really down and dialed in. I mean, I think one of the reasons vinyl is so successful and why Vinile is becoming so successful is that we really knew who we wanted to be. We had explored all sides of all angles and made sure we knew, you know, the menu, the cocktails, the wine. We had an identity in everything that we wanted to do. And that made us pretty bulletproof when we ran into uncertainty or what we should do, you know, operationally. So, you know, even what your uniforms are going to be, what the logo is going to be, what your management structure, everything. So that's a technical one, but I think it's really important. I mean, and you can't even really have a conversation with somebody seriously about raising capital or anything until you really have that down anyways, because that's when all the questions start popping up that you didn't know were going to be asked. Sort of spiritually, in a sense, I would say start saying it to the world. Just start putting it out there. You know, I always joke with people that Vinile Steakhouse, that I had to start it because I had told so many people about this rock and roll steakhouse I was going to start that someday if I ever died, they were going to go, oh, Kevin Flannery, the guy who always talked about the rock and roll steakhouse. Yeah, I remember him. He was a great guy, you know, and I didn't want to go down like that. So I had, I think, sort of subconsciously told anybody who would listen along my life about this restaurant I was going to start. And it really did hold me accountable in some senses. Had I just kind of kept it to myself, would have been very convenient to not do it. So I like that method. It's a little bold and it can maybe be hard to do, but I think once you get serious about it, start putting it out there and telling your friends and your family or loved ones that you're going to do it. And you'd be surprised too. People might perk up and say, I'll do it with you. You know, you might catch some people along the way that want to get involved as well. So those would be my two bits of advice. And I'm a very available to be reached out to. If you need to contact me for any thoughts, I love to help young and aspiring entrepreneurs. And I love to provide input. I'm very transparent on all that stuff. So happy to help.
So I'm going to give the contact information, but I absolutely love what you just said on the spiritual side because I couldn't agree with you more. There's a power to writing things down and verbalizing things. And from the verbalizing standpoint, the more you put it out there, on the one hand, it holds you accountable. But on the other hand, if you're putting it out there sincerely, it drives you towards it. I mean, this was something you had in your mind 20 years ago. And it's here, you know, and there's so many things in my business career where I've written down annual goals or quarterly goals, and they happen. And I really believe there's a connection between the writing of the down and the happening of it. And really activating that subconscious mind, as you say. And I think this is really important for people to think about. Like, whether it's business or academia or arts, whatever it is, you do want to have your mind and your spiritual direction in alignment, because ultimately those are what you're relying on in every journey you go on. And I think that's such a great way to categorize that. So I really appreciate that. As you said, Kevin, if you want to reach out to Kevin, he's on Instagram at Vinile Steakhouse or at Vinile Chophouse, Kevin Flannery. Kevin, this has been an absolute pleasure. I've really enjoyed our conversation and I've really learned a lot. When we get off, I'm looking forward to coming to these restaurants because I know my kids are going to love it. I know I'm going to love it. This was really cool, man. So thank you very much for coming in.
Yeah, excited to meet your family and show you. I can't wait to pick out some albums while we're there, talk some more music, and
would love it.
Love to see some of your listeners at the restaurant too. Please mention you're a listener when you come in. We'd be happy to take great care of you.
That's awesome, Kevin. Thank you very much, man.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you for listening to The Profitable Table, fed by Woolco Foods. Please be sure to rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast app. And to learn more about Woolco Foods or Steven Toboroff, please visit us at woolcofoods.net.